Ladies and gentlemen, the idea that wealth is a manifestation of inner integration is often overlooked in favor of more material explanations for success, luck, timing, connections, or grinding work. But beneath all those surface factors lies a deeper psychological reality. Wealth, especially the kind that appears to arrive overnight, is not just about acquiring external possessions. It is about the alignment of internal forces. It emerges not as a reward, but as a reflection of an individual whose conscious and unconscious selves have come into harmony. When a person reaches inner integration, the world begins to mirror back the order, clarity, and value that has been cultivated within. Most people live in a fragmented state. They desire one thing but act in ways that sabotage that desire. Their goals are misaligned with their beliefs, and their decisions are driven by unconscious fears or wounds they have never dared to confront. This creates internal noise, a dissonance that repels the very success they chase. It's not that the universe withholds wealth from them, it's that they are not psychologically ready to hold it. Their inner world is chaotic, uncertain, and filled with contradictions. Integration changes that. It brings coherence. When your thoughts, emotions, and actions are no longer at war with one another, a kind of energetic clarity emerges. This clarity is magnetic. It draws opportunities, connections, and ideas that seem to appear out of nowhere. But they are not random. They are simply now visible because the fog within has lifted. Integration means knowing your values, trusting your instincts, and aligning your daily choices with your deeper sense of purpose. It means being able to say no to what distracts and yes to what builds. It means no longer being ruled by unconscious scripts, like the fear of failure, the need to prove your worth, or the drive to compete for validation. Instead, your actions arise from a place of self-understanding. You begin to operate from a grounded center, not from reaction but from intention. This shift changes everything. Decisions become easier. Your focus sharpens. You stop wasting energy in self-doubt or impulsivity. You conserve your strength for what matters, and over time the external results begin to match your internal state. When this alignment reaches a certain threshold, it can feel as though things start happening very quickly. Wealth arrives overnight, not because it was conjured from nowhere, but because the person has finally become psychologically capable of holding it. The universe, in a sense, recognizes the readiness. The opportunities you once couldn't see are now obvious. The risks you once feared now feel natural. The self-discipline that once eluded you is now a daily ritual. You are no longer resisting your own success. This is why inner integration is the first and most important habit to cultivate. It is not merely about mindset. It is about bringing all parts of the psyche into alignment. The rational and the emotional, the conscious and the unconscious, the light and the shadow. When this happens, your life moves with coherence and force. Your words carry power. Your work carries value. And your path clears. Wealth follows not as a goal but as a byproduct. The rich inner life creates a rich outer life. What looks like a sudden leap to others is really a long, brewing transformation that has finally ripened. When the inner world is whole, the outer world begins to echo that wholeness. That is how you become rich overnight. Habits are often misunderstood as mere acts of repetition, small decisions repeated daily until they accumulate into visible outcomes. But beneath this practical view lies a deeper truth. Habits are not random behaviors. They are structured, symbolic expressions of the psyche archetypal patterns that repeat themselves through action. Every habit a person maintains reflects a psychological blueprint, a relationship between the individual and the deeper forces that move them. What appears to be mundane or routine on the surface, waking up early, saving money, exercising restraint, planning ahead, is in fact an outer ritual mirroring an inner structure. If those inner patterns are fragmented or unconscious, the habits will reflect that fragmentation. But if the inner world is ordered and integrated, the habits will naturally become tools of prosperity. The rich are not made simply by what they do. They are made by the unconscious structures that drive what they do. Take, for instance, the habit of delayed gratification. On the surface, it's a financial or behavioral strategy, but psychologically it is rooted in the archetype of maturity, the ability to resist fleeting temptation in service of a long-term vision. This habit cannot be maintained through discipline alone unless the person has psychologically internalized the value of future-oriented thinking. The poor often act on impulse, not because they lack intelligence, but because they are unconsciously ruled by unmet emotional needs or fears that demand immediate relief. To change this, the structure within must change. Another example is the habit of consistency. A person who builds wealth over time typically engages in consistent, steady, repeatable behaviors that compound. But where does consistency come from? Not from external motivation. It arises from inner clarity, a deep connection to purpose, to identity, to one's role in the world. Without this clarity, habits fall apart at the first sign of resistance. But when actions are supported by internal archetypes, such as the warrior discipline, the sage wisdom, or the creator vision, habits become rituals. They no longer feel like burdens. They become expressions of the self. It's also important to recognize that people do not simply choose their habits. They inherit them. From childhood, we absorb patterns from caregivers, cultures, and collective beliefs. These patterns are stored in the unconscious and replayed throughout life unless consciously rewritten. The habit of scarcity, for example, may come not from real deprivation but from an inherited psychological narrative that says there's never enough. You must struggle to earn, or that money corrupts. Unless that narrative is brought to awareness and transformed, any habit aimed at building wealth will eventually be sabotaged. The outer behavior must be supported by a reshaped inner structure. To develop wealth producing habits, then, one must go deeper than productivity hacks or motivational quotes. One must explore which archetypes are currently active, which have been suppressed, and which need to be awakened. This is a psychological journey, not a behavioral one. When the psyche is reordered, when unconscious fears are brought into the light, and when a person begins to embody the roles that align with growth and purpose, the habits naturally follow. And these habits, in turn, bring material abundance. The difference between someone who builds wealth and someone who remains stuck is rarely knowledge. It is the structure of their habits, and thus the structure of their psyche. Habits are not trivial, they are sacred. They are how the unconscious becomes visible. They are how destiny takes form through repetition. By consciously choosing and embodying the right habits, you are not just changing behavior. You are reshaping the very architecture of your life. In doing so, you align with patterns that lead to richness, not just in wealth, but in meaning. The idea that the shadow holds the key to abundance may seem paradoxical at first. Most people associate wealth with confidence, clarity, and success, qualities that exist in the light of awareness. But what if the true source of prosperity lies hidden in the parts of ourselves we most fear, reject, or ignore? The shadow represents those unconscious aspects of the self that have been cast away, denied, or repressed. These parts do not disappear. They operate from the depths, often sabotaging our desires or creating patterns of scarcity, insecurity, and self-sabotage. Yet within the shadow lies immense power, or untapped energy that, when integrated, can become the fuel for transformation, creativity, and sudden breakthroughs that manifest as overnight success. Most people are unaware of how deeply their shadow influences their financial life. Fear of rejection, unworthiness, shame about wanting more, guilt over desiring wealth. These emotional undercurrents are rarely acknowledged, yet they shape decision making, limit risks taking, and distort self-image. One might outwardly strive for success, but inwardly feel undeserving of it. This inner contradiction creates stagnation, confusion, and failure that seems inexplicable. The truth is, the unexamined parts of the psyche always express themselves. If they are not expressed through conscious integration, they erupt through destructive patterns or missed opportunities. Facing the shadow means turning inward to meet the parts of yourself that you've disowned. It means being honest about your envy of others' success, your fear of power, your resentment of responsibility, or your resistance to change. It involves acknowledging how past wounds have shaped your beliefs about money, security, and self-worth. This process is not comfortable, but it is liberating. When you confront the shadow, you reclaim the energy trapped within it. What was once suppressed becomes available, the confidence you thought others had and you lacked. It was always yours, buried beneath layers of fear. The creativity you thought was absent, it was hidden under the belief that your voice didn't matter. These revelations can lead to rapid internal shifts that, when acted upon, produce results that feel instantaneous. This is why some people seem to succeed suddenly after years of failure. It's not that they learned something new overnight, it's that they faced what had been holding them back all along. They stopped running from their fear and instead used it as a compass. They embraced responsibility rather than avoiding it. They stopped seeking approval and started trusting their own instincts. When the shadow is no longer feared but understood, it becomes an ally. It brings with it a surge of clarity and courage that can change the entire trajectory of a life. Wealth is not withheld from people because they are unworthy. It is often inaccessible because they are unknowingly blocking it. The block is rarely external. It's internal, created by the parts of the self that are afraid to be seen or empowered. The habit of confronting the shadow is the habit of psychological maturity. It requires stillness, reflection, and the courage to ask difficult questions, but it also delivers the greatest rewards, because once you are no longer afraid of yourself, you become unstoppable. You stop compromising, you stop shrinking, you stop waiting for permission, and when that inner permission is granted, the outer world often responds with astonishing speed. Opportunities appear, decisions become clearer. The fear of failure fades, wealth flows, not because the world has changed, but because your relationship to it has. The shadow, once a source of self, doubt becomes the source of self-command. And that shift can create abundance that feels as though it happened overnight, though in truth it was always waiting in the dark, asking to be seen. Value creation is deeply rooted in self-knowledge. While the world often chases external validation, strategies, and formulas to generate wealth, the foundation of sustainable success lies in understanding oneself. Without self-knowledge, even the most effective tactics fail to produce lasting results. Why? Because the actions a person takes without inner clarity are reactive rather than intentional, borrowed rather than embodied. The person may imitate what others do to create value, but without knowing their own nature, they become disconnected from authenticity. And in today's world, authenticity is currency. To create value that others recognize and are willing to reward, you must first understand what you bring to the table, not just in terms of skills or experience, but in essence. Who are you when everything else is stripped away? What do you intuitively understand, see, or feel that what themes return to you over and over, not by accident, but because they reflect the core of who you are? These questions are not abstract, they are strategic. The clearer you are about your own nature, the more precisely you can align your work, ideas, and energy with what genuinely matters. This alignment is what gives your actions power. People who lack self-knowledge often fall into cycles of comparison. They pursue paths that look successful for others, hoping to recreate similar outcomes, but wonder why they feel drained or why their efforts don't produce lasting momentum. The reason is simple: imitation lacks resonance. You cannot create deep, lasting value by pretending to be someone else. True value arises when you tap into the parts of yourself that are uniquely yours. Your perspective, your story, your insight, your curiosity. When you are deeply connected to yourself, everything you offer becomes an extension of that connection, and people respond to that depth, often with surprising intensity and loyalty. The habit of daily introspection is what keeps this connection alive. It's not about obsessively analyzing yourself or becoming self-involved. It's about developing the discipline of asking, why am I doing this? Does this align with what I believe in? Am I acting out of fear, habit, or alignment? These questions cut through distraction. They ground your decisions in something real. Over time, this self-checking process helps you refine your inner compass. You start to notice where your energy flows effortlessly and where it gets stuck. You begin to distinguish between what feels good in the moment and what is truly right for you, and this clarity has practical consequences. It influences how you communicate, how you price your services, how you negotiate, and how you position yourself in the marketplace. People sense when someone is speaking from a place of deep inner clarity. They sense when your confidence isn't inflated, but grounded. They trust it because it reflects a stability that can't be faked. This is what attracts clients, opportunities, and partnerships that feel aligned and fruitful. You're not just another person selling something. You're a person who knows exactly what they're offering and why it matters. When you create from that place, you don't have to beg for attention. Your value speaks for itself. Wealth begins to flow, not because you forced it, but because you unlocked the channel through which it naturally wants to move. Self-knowledge opens that channel. It filters out noise, sharpens your message, and clarifies your offer. It helps you stop chasing trends and start defining them, and that is the path to becoming not just successful, but indispensable. In the end, money is a mirror. It reflects not just effort, but identity. If you don't know who you are, you won't know how to create something truly valuable. But when you do, everything you touch begins to carry the stamp of your essence. And that essence is what the world will pay for. Time, as commonly understood, is measured in days, hours, and years. A linear sequence where progress appears to unfold step by step. But from a psychological perspective, time does not follow this strict chronology. It bends, contracts, and expands according to inner readiness, awareness, and transformation. The notion that wealth can arrive overnight makes no sense within a strictly chronological framework, but in psychological terms, it is entirely valid. A person may work for years without visible progress and then suddenly break through into success in what appears to be a moment. This moment is not magic. It is the intersection of inner readiness and external opportunity. When your inner world reaches a state of alignment, time seems to accelerate. What once took months may now take days. What seemed impossible now unfolds effortlessly. This is not fantasy. It is the natural rhythm of a psyche that has found its center. Most people misunderstand the role of preparation. They believe that effort alone produces results, but effort, when misaligned with the unconscious, leads to burnout, frustration, and stagnation. You can work endlessly, yet make no meaningful movement forward if the work does not reflect your truth. Conversely, when effort is infused with clarity, vision, and inner coherence, the results compound rapidly. You might spend years learning, struggling, growing, without external reward, and then, one day, the fruits of that growth become visible all at once. What others call overnight success is simply the point where inner development meets its external expression. This understanding shifts how we relate to time. Rather than obsessing over how fast things are happening, we begin to focus on how deeply we are growing. Because when depth is achieved, speed follows. The deeper your roots, the higher you can grow. Rushing without reflection leads to shallow outcomes, but deep inner work, clarifying purpose, healing wounds, facing fears, lays the foundation for breakthroughs that defy ordinary timelines. This principle applies especially to wealth. Financial growth is often non-linear. For years, a person may struggle financially while building skills, understanding their market, or confronting limiting beliefs about money and self-worth. Nothing seems to work, but internally something is shifting, the psyche is reorganizing, old identities are falling away, new potentials are forming, and then with one insight, one bold decision, one act of courage, everything changes. Not because it was sudden, but because the internal threshold had finally been crossed. Time in that moment collapses. Years of effort now translate into rapid outcomes. Understanding time in this way cultivates patience, not passive waiting, but active trust in the process of becoming. You no longer panic when results are delayed. You don't compare your timeline to others. You recognize that the soul has its own pace. Some chapters require silence, invisibility, and solitude. They are not wasted, they are sacred. They are the times when your inner architecture is being built. When the time is right, that structure will support extraordinary results. In this light, the habit of respecting time becomes a spiritual practice. You stop trying to force outcomes and start preparing yourself to receive them. You ask, am I ready for what I want? Can I hold the weight of success? Do I have the integrity to manage abundance without losing myself? These questions are not distractions. They are the real work. Because when the answer is yes, when you are truly ready, things begin to move with startling speed. So the phrase overnight success is not a lie. It's simply misunderstood. It is not the result of sudden fortune, but of deep preparation meeting the right moment. When the inner world aligns, time serves you. It bends around your readiness, not your urgency. That is the psychology of true wealth. It arrives when you do. Riches are reflections, not rewards. This idea challenges the commonly held belief that wealth is earned through external effort alone, as though money were some distant prize given to those who work the hardest or conform most perfectly to societal standards. But from a psychological perspective, wealth is not something you pursue. It is something that mirrors who you are. It reflects your relationship with yourself, your beliefs, your identity, your sense of worth, and your capacity to receive. The world gives back to you what you project into it. Therefore, if your inner state is filled with conflict, fear, confusion, or scarcity, the external world will echo those patterns. But if your inner world is ordered, confident, expansive, and clear, then wealth becomes not just possible, but inevitable. Money is not neutral. It is symbolic. It reflects your emotional relationship with value, both how you perceive your own and how you relate to the value offered by others. A person who believes they are inherently unworthy will unconsciously sabotage financial opportunities. They might undercharge, overwork, procrastinate, or avoid visibility, not because they lack talent, but because something within tells them they do not deserve to be seen, chosen, or enriched. In this way, wealth becomes a psychological mirror. It shows us what we truly believe, not just consciously, but at the deepest layers of the unconscious mind. This is why people can chase money for decades and still feel poor. It is not always about the amount in their bank account. It is about their internal capacity to experience abundance. Without inner change, even sudden financial gain will dissolve quickly. This is not rare. It happens often to lottery winners, celebrities, and entrepreneurs who achieve rapid success but lack the psychological foundation to sustain it, because money amplifies what is already within. If there is chaos, money will deepen it. If there is self-knowledge and integrity, money will strengthen it. The outer world only multiplies the truth of your inner condition. To change your financial reality, you must begin by examining the beliefs and patterns that shape your current one. This requires deep honesty. Do you resent those who have wealth? Do you secretly believe money is corrupting? Do you feel guilty for wanting more? These internal conflicts block the natural flow of abundance. You cannot attract what you internally resist. Therefore, the habit of inner reflection becomes essential, not to judge yourself, but to observe, to become aware of what parts of you need healing, clarity, or redefinition in relation to wealth. As you clean these inner lenses, your financial reality begins to shift. You start to notice opportunities that were previously invisible. You take bolder, more aligned actions. You attract people who see and appreciate your value. You begin to operate from a place of wholeness rather than desperation, and the world reflects this back to you through clients, income, recognition, and growth that feels both organic and expansive. Wealth, then, is not a finish line. It is a reflection of your internal state projected outward. When your inner world is rich with clarity, with confidence, with vision and integrity, your outer world cannot help but mirror that wealth. It may not happen instantly, but it will happen inevitably, because the universe responds not to your desires, but to your frequency. It gives back what you radiate. To become rich is not simply to strive harder, but to become the kind of person who naturally receives, holds, and multiplies abundance.